The crystal glass shattered first. It slipped from Mrs. Jun's hand and exploded against the marble floor in a sharp, violent sound that silenced the entire dining room, but it was not the mess that made her breath stop in her throat. It was the way her son was looking at Park Jimin, not glancing, not watching, looking, the kind of look that stripped a room bare, the kind that lingered too long in silence, the kind that held history in it, want in it, something terrifyingly honest. And Mrs. Jun hated honesty when it came in that shape. The chandeliers above them burned in warm gold, throwing fractured light over crystal bowls, polished silver and untouched food. The dining table was too long for comfort, dressed in white linen and expensive restraint. Outside the windows, rain dragged itself down the glass in silver veins, turning the Seoul skyline into something blurred and distant. No one moved. Jungkook sat at the far end of the table, one hand resting beside his wineglass, the other curled too tightly against his knee. His face gave away almost nothing, but his eyes did. They always did when they found Jimin. And Jimin was still standing beside the piano. He had only laughed a second ago. Softly, politely, the way he always did in rooms that did not belong to him. Now his smile was gone, Mrs. Jun's breathing sharpened. Look at him like that. Voice cut through the room so cleanly it felt like a blade dragged across skin. Jimin froze, Jungkook did not. The rain outside grew louder, tapping against the tall windows like impatient fingers. Somewhere in the house the grandfather clock ticked once. Then again, no one spoke. Mrs. Jun's eyes remained fixed on her son, dark and unblinking. "You think I do not see it," she said, quieter now, which made it worse. "You think a mother cannot tell when her son is ruining himself." Jimin lowered his gaze first. That more than anything made Jungkook move. He stood so abruptly his chair scraped against the floor with a violent sound. The air changed instantly. Tighter, colder, stop. His voice was low, but it carried. Mrs. Jun turned to him with the expression of a woman who had spent her life being obeyed. "Sit down." Jungkook did not even blink. "Don't talk to him like that." The words landed hard enough to alter the shape of the room. Jimin's fingers curled at his sides. He knew this feeling, knew it too well. The pressure before impact, the silence before something precious broke beyond repair. He should have left the moment Mrs. Jun invited him into this house. He should have known kindness from powerful people always came with a knife hidden beneath it. But Jungkook had looked at him in the doorway, one hand still on the brass handle, dark hair damp from rain, and said, "Stay." Jimin stayed. That had always been his first mistake. Mrs. Jun gave a thin smile that held no warmth. "You embarrass yourself." Jungkook laughed once, short and hollow. "No, you're embarrassed because I'm not pretending." The words hit harder than the shattered glass. Mrs. Jun's expression changed then, not louder, not crueler, but colder. Far colder. The kind of cold that did not shout because it never had to. "You will throw away your future for a feeling." Jungkook's jaw tightened. For a moment no one breathed, then Jungkook looked at Jimin again. And there it was, that unbearable softness, that devastating certainty. Jimin felt it like a hand pressed directly against his ribs. It was not lust, not impulse, not curiosity. It was worse, it was devotion. Mrs. Jun saw it too, and that was what she could not forgive. Jimin looked away because he had to, because there were some kinds of love too naked to survive being witnessed. His pulse thundered in his ears. He could smell rain-soaked wool from Jungkook's coat draped over the chair. He could taste the metallic edge of tension in the air. The room felt too warm, too bright, too full of things no one was supposed to name. He had spent years learning how to survive by making himself smaller, softer, easier to dismiss, smile gently, speak carefully, never reach first, never need too much, never let anyone see how badly being chosen could ruin you. And yet here Jungkook was, standing in front of his mother like a match held to gasoline. Jimin's throat tightened. "Jungkook," he said quietly. It should have sounded like a warning, it sounded like pleading. Jungkook turned at once, always at once. That was another thing his mother hated. How quickly Jungkook responded to him, how instinctively. As if Jimin's voice had become something his body recognized before thought. Jimin wished suddenly and painfully that Jungkook would stop looking at him like that, not because he did not want it, because he did, and wanting it had already begun to destroy him. Mrs. Jun saw the shift in Jimin's face and smiled with quiet triumph. "There," she said softly. "At least one of you still understands shame." Jungkook moved before Jimin could stop him. The sound of his palm striking the table cracked through the room like gunfire. Silverware jumped, a glass tipped and rolled. Enough. His voice was no longer calm. Mrs. Jun stared at him. Jimin had seen Jungkook angry before, sharp, reckless. Wild in the way young men became when they had too much feeling and nowhere safe to put it. But this was different. This was not anger, this was fear wearing anger's face. And suddenly Jimin understood. Jungkook was not afraid of losing his mother's approval. He was afraid Jimin would believe her, that he would leave. The realization hit so hard Jimin almost stepped back, because it was true. He had already been planning how to disappear. He had already spent half the evening memorizing exits. That was what Jimin did when things became too real. He left before anyone could ask him to. Mrs. Jun rose slowly from her chair, her silk dress whispered against the floor. Her face was composed again, elegant and merciless. "When he leaves you," she said, eyes fixed on Jungkook, "and he will, because boys like him always leave before they are left, do not come to me grieving what you chose." Jimin stopped breathing. The cruelty of it was not in the insult. It was in how precisely she had found the wound. Jungkook went still, too still, and Jimin knew with sudden dread that this was no longer about disapproval. Mrs. Jun had not guessed. She knew enough about Jimin to strike where it would bleed deepest. Jimin's fingers went cold. There were things about him Jungkook's mother should not know, things Jungkook himself did not know, not the whole truth, not about the city he had left behind. Not about the blood on the bathroom tile 3 winters ago, not about the phone calls he still ignored, not about why he never let anyone walk him home twice. Jimin lifted his head slowly. Mrs. Jun met his gaze and held it. And in her eyes Jimin saw recognition, not suspicion, recognition, something old and deliberate settled in his stomach. She knew him, not personally, but enough to be dangerous. The rain outside came harder now, drumming against the windows in frantic bursts. Thunder rolled somewhere distant, low and hungry. Jungkook turned toward Jimin, and for the first time that night uncertainty entered his face. It was small, but it was there, and it terrified Jimin more than anything else, because Jungkook was beginning to realize there were parts of Jimin he had never been allowed to see. Jimin forced his voice steady. "I should go." "No," Jungkook said it instantly, too fast, too raw. Mrs. Jun smiled. Jimin felt something in his chest fracture at the sound. He looked at Jungkook then, really looked, and saw everything he had been trying not to name, the trembling restraint, the sleepless eyes, the desperate, fragile hope. Jungkook was in love with him, not carelessly, not halfway, hopelessly, and Jimin, God help him, had been falling just as hard. That was the real disaster, not that Jungkook's mother had seen it, that she was right to fear it. Because if Jimin stayed, he would let himself be loved, and if he let that happen, everything buried in him would eventually claw its way into the light. Mrs. Jun's voice came soft as silk. "Ask him why he left Busan." Jungkook's eyes snapped to Jimin. The room disappeared. The rain, the glass, the gold light, the silence, gone. There was only the sound of his own pulse and Jungkook staring at him as if the ground had shifted beneath his feet. Jimin felt the blood drain from his face. He had never told him about Busan, never told him what happened there, never told him why he flinched at unknown numbers, never told him whose ring he still kept in the back of a locked drawer. Jungkook said his name once, quietly, like something already breaking, and Jimin understood in one sharp and merciless instant that love was never the cruelest thing in the room. The truth was, Jimin did not answer. He stood in the center of the Jun family dining room with rain trembling against the windows and Jungkook's name still caught somewhere beneath his ribs, but his mouth refused to move. The silence that followed Mrs. Jun's words was not empty. It was alive, sharp, breathing, waiting for him to bleed first. Jungkook was staring at him now, not with anger, not even with betrayal, with something far worse. Confusion wrapped in hurt. The kind that made his face look younger, stripped suddenly of all its confidence, all its practiced defiance. It was the face of someone realizing love had been happening in a room with locked doors he had never been given keys to open. "Busan?" Jungkook asked, just one word, but Jimin felt it like a blade drawn slowly across old scar tissue. Mrs. Jun said nothing more. She did not need to. She had already done what she intended, placed a loaded weapon between them and stepped back to watch who reached for it first. Jimin swallowed hard. His pulse was so loud it blurred the edges of everything. The chandeliers above him glowed too bright. The scent of rain and expensive perfume turned suffocating. His fingers felt numb, his skin too tight. He had always known this moment would come, not this room, not this night, not with Jungkook looking at him like that, but truth was patient. It waited. It let people build warmth around themselves before stepping through the door with blood on its hands. Jimin exhaled slowly, though it felt more like something collapsing inside him. "I said I should go." Voice came out quieter than he meant it to. Jungkook moved instantly. "No." That same answer, immediate, unthinking, like refusal was instinct when it came to Jimin leaving, and God, Jimin hated how much that still reached him. Mrs. Jun picked up her napkin with composed hands and set it neatly beside her untouched plate, as if none of this was worth disrupting her appetite. "You should let him," she said. "Running is the only thing he has ever done well." Jungkook turned so fast the legs of his chair scraped the marble. "Stop talking about him like you know him." Mrs. Jun looked at her son with cool disdain. I know enough. Shut his eyes for one brief second. Enough, that was the cruelest kind of knowledge. Not full truth, just enough truth to ruin what came after. He should leave now, before Jungkook asked again, before Mrs. Jun said more, before the carefully built architecture of this fragile, impossible thing between them came down in front of both of them. But Jungkook was already walking toward him, not quickly, not recklessly, carefully, as if Jimin were something frightened enough to bolt, and maybe he was. When Jungkook stopped in front of him, the room seemed to narrow around the space between their bodies. Jimin could smell rain on his skin, clean soap, the faint smoke from the fireplace that had settled into his coat earlier that evening. Familiar things, dangerous things. Jungkook's voice lowered. Look at me. Jimin did not because he could not, because he knew if he did he might stay. Jimin, that voice again, softer now, not demanding, not angry, and somehow that made it worse. Jimin lifted his eyes. Jungkook's face had changed. The anger was still there but buried under something rawer, something wounded and trying not to show it. Tell me she's lying. The words landed with quiet devastation. Mrs. Jun said nothing. Rain struck the windows in restless sheets. Jimin stared at Jungkook and thought absurdly of the first time they met, not because it mattered now, because pain was cruel like that. It dragged tenderness into rooms where it had no chance of surviving. It had been late autumn, 2 years ago, at a private gallery opening Jimin had no business attending. He had gone in borrowed black silk, and a smile polished into something expensive enough to belong there. The room smelled like champagne and old money. Everyone inside had mastered the art of pretending to be untouched by the world. Jungkook had ruined that illusion in less than 5 minutes. He had stood in front of a massive oil painting, hands in his pockets, frowning at it like it had personally offended him. Jimin, passing by with a drink in hand, had paused just long enough to hear him mutter, "It looks like sadness with good lighting." Laughed before he could stop himself. Jungkook turned, startled, and looked at him like he had not expected anyone in that room to sound real. That had been the beginning, not fireworks, not fate, just recognition. Two people too careful with themselves meeting in a room full of people pretending not to feel anything at all. Jimin should have known then how dangerous it was. Jungkook had looked at him that night the same way he looked at him now. As if Jimin were not background noise, not decoration, not temporary, as if he were something worth noticing. It had undone him slowly, now it would undo him all at once. Jimin forced himself to speak. She's not lying. The words fell soft. Jungkook went still. Mrs. Jun watched in silence, victorious and immaculate. Jimin felt sick. Jungkook's expression did not shatter. That would have been easier. It changed in smaller ways. More painful ones, the tension in his jaw, the flicker in his eyes, the subtle recall of someone trying not to feel a wound as it opened. You left Busan, Jungkook said. Yes. Why? Jimin's throat tightened. Because I was 19 and stupid enough to believe love could save me. Because someone put a ring in my hand and blood on my conscience. Because I learned too young that devotion can become a cage faster than anyone admits. Because one winter night I stood barefoot in a locked bathroom while someone pounded on the door hard enough to split the frame, and afterward I never again confused being wanted with being safe. But truth did not arrive whole. It never had. Jimin's voice was flat when he answered. Because staying would have buried me. Stared at him. Mrs. Jun's gaze sharpened, but Jimin did not look at her. He could feel the old panic crawling up his spine now, cold and familiar. Busan rose in fragments behind his eyes. The hiss of the ocean in winter, streetlights bleeding gold into wet pavement, the taste of iron in his mouth, a cracked mirror, a locked phone vibrating on the floor. He had spent years learning how not to remember in sequence. Jungkook took a step closer. Buried by what? Jimin laughed then, a small sound, humorless, tired. You. The word slipped out before he could stop it. Jungkook blinked. Mrs. Jun's eyes narrowed. Jimin swallowed, but it was too late to pull the truth back now. He could feel all of them listening. The storm, the silence, the woman at the table who already knew enough to cut him open, the man in front of him who had never realized how much damage tenderness could do. Jimin's chest rose sharply. You, he repeated, quieter now. Not you exactly, not then, but this, what this becomes. Jungkook did not move. Jimin could see the moment the meaning struck him, not all at once. Piece by piece, the fear, the avoidance, the exits Jimin always memorized, the way he never stayed asleep if Jungkook left the bed, the way he smiled whenever things got too intimate, too honest, too close to becoming irreversible. Jimin had not been hesitant because he felt too little. He had been terrified because he felt too much. Jungkook's face changed with the realization, his anger thinned, his hurt remained, but beneath both was something deeper now. Something almost unbearable in its tenderness. Jimin, don't, Jimin's voice cracked. Please don't say my name like that right now. If Jungkook sounded gentle, Jimin might break. The room had gone so quiet the rain sounded deafening. Mrs. Jun rose from her chair and crossed the marble floor with slow, measured grace. She stopped only a few feet away, her expression unreadable. When he was 19, she said, he was involved with someone dangerous. Whole body locked, Jungkook turned sharply. Mother. Nearly destroyed his life for it. Stop. Mrs. Jun ignored him. There was an investigation, money missing, assault charges. His name was never made public, but it was close enough to ruin him. Jungkook's eyes snapped back to Jimin. The blood left Jimin's hands. It was suddenly hard to breathe, not because she was lying, because she was telling it too cleanly, as if trauma were a scandal to be summarized over dinner. Jungkook's voice was quiet now, too quiet. Is that true? Jimin said nothing. Because what answer existed? Yes, but not the way she means it. Yes, but I was not the one people needed saving from. Yes, but survival always looks ugly in someone else's version of the story. His silence was answer enough. Jungkook stepped back. It was barely a movement. Jimin felt it like impact, not distance, not rejection, but the instinctive retreat of someone trying to rearrange the person they loved into the shape of what they had just learned. And that hurt more than accusation ever could. Jimin looked at him and understood with devastating clarity that this was the moment everything changed, not because Jungkook loved him less, because now Jungkook would have to decide whether love could survive knowing. Jimin had spent years fearing this exact silence, not shouting, not disgust, just the pause, the quiet recalculation after the truth entered the room. He stepped back once, then again. Jungkook noticed immediately. Jimin shook his head. His voice was barely above a whisper. I told you staying near me was never going to end gently. This time, when he turned toward the door, no one stopped him.
The front door closed behind Jimin with a sound so soft it should not have felt violent. But inside the Jian house, it landed like a verdict. For a long second, Jungkook did not move. He stood in the center of the dining room, staring at the empty doorway Jimin had vanished through, as if his body had not yet caught up to what had happened. Rain hissed against the windows. The grandfather clock resumed its patient ticking. Somewhere in the kitchen, someone dropped a spoon and the tiny metallic sound echoed too loudly in the silence. Then Jungkook inhaled, sharp, ragged, and turned to his mother. The look in his eyes made even Mrs. Jian pause. It was not grief, not yet. Grief was slower, softer. It came after the wreckage. This was fury stripped down to bone. What did you do? His voice was quiet enough to be dangerous. Mrs. Jian folded her hands in front of her. I told you the truth. No. Jungkook took one step toward her. You used it. Her gaze did not waver. Because you refused to see what was in front of you. Jungkook laughed once, disbelieving and hollow. What was in front of me was someone trying to breathe while you cut him open. He lied to you. He survived something and did not tell me. Mrs. Jian's expression sharpened. Do not romanticize this. Not reduce him to something convenient for you to despise. The rain hit harder, a violent scatter against the glass. Mrs. Jian studied her son with a strange stillness, as if seeing him clearly for the first time and finding the result unacceptable. You are speaking as though this is noble. Jungkook's jaw tightened. I'm speaking as someone who just watched you weaponize a man's worst memory because you were afraid of the way I love him. That did it. Something in Mrs. Jian's face hardened, not into anger but offense. Cold and elegant and old. You are infatuated. Jungkook's smile was brief and joyless. No. That would be easier. Answer struck the room like another shattered glass. Mrs. Jian's eyes narrowed. Jungkook had spent most of his life being underestimated by people who mistook quiet for obedience. His mother had made that mistake longer than anyone. She had mistaken his restraint for pliability, his silence for surrender, his love for weakness. And now she was watching the consequence of that miscalculation stand in front of her with his hands shaking and his voice frighteningly steady. You think this ends because he walked out that door? Jungkook asked. You think humiliation is enough to make me stop? It should be enough to make him stop. That landed harder than she intended. Jungkook went still, then laughed again, but this time the sound was almost cruel. You really do not understand him at all. Mrs. Jian held his gaze. Then explain him. Jungkook's chest rose once, slowly, as if forcing himself not to break the nearest thing in reach. He leaves before people can use what they know against him. He makes himself easy to abandon so it hurts less when someone does. He memorizes exits. He apologizes before he asks for anything. He smiles when he is frightened because somewhere along the way he learned softness is safer to witness than pain. Mrs. Jian said nothing. Jungkook stepped closer. And tonight you proved him right. For the first time, something flickered in her face, not guilt, but something quieter, less comfortable. Jungkook saw it and hated her a little more for how quickly she buried it. "You think I am reckless," he said. "I think you are afraid." Mrs. Jeon's voice sharpened. "Afraid of what? That he matters enough to change me." Silence that followed was absolute. It was not denial that unsettled her. It was how easily he said it, how true it sounded. Mrs. Jeon's fingers curled once against her palm. "People like him." Jungkook cut in so fast it felt like a strike. Finish that sentence carefully. Lips parted, then closed. Because for all her power, for all her precision, even she understood there were lines that once crossed could not be repaired. Jungkook looked at her for another long second, then stepped back. When he spoke again, his voice was calm. That frightened her more. "If you ever use him to punish me again, I will make sure losing me is the smallest consequence you face." Mrs. Jeon stared at her son and saw, perhaps too late, that she had not protected him tonight. She had driven a blade into the one place he would never forgive her for touching. Jungkook turned and left before she could answer. By the time he reached the front steps, the rain had become merciless. Cold water struck his face, soaked through his shirt, slid down the back of his neck in icy streams. He barely felt it. The driver called his name from under the awning, but Jungkook ignored him and walked straight into the storm. Jimin had no car, no umbrella. He would have gone on foot first. Always on foot. Always long enough to think he could outrun being followed. Jungkook knew him too well. That knowledge struck him now with painful clarity. How many things he had noticed without understanding. The way Jimin never wore the same route home twice. The way he never sat with his back to windows. The way his hand twitched toward his pocket every time an unknown number lit up his screen. Not distance. Defense. Jungkook cursed under his breath and kept moving. The streets beyond the Jeon estate blurred under rain and reflected city light. Tires hissed over wet pavement. Headlights smeared gold across black asphalt. Seoul at night looked like a wound dressed in neon. He spotted Jimin 3 blocks later, walking too fast, no umbrella. Coat dark with rain, shoulders rigid. Head down. For one suspended second, Jungkook only watched him. Jimin looked smaller in the storm, not fragile, just unbearably alone. Then Jungkook called his name. Jimin stopped. He did not turn immediately. Rain ran from his hair, down the line of his jaw, into the collar of his coat. Cars passed. Light flickered red, then white, then gone. When he finally turned, his face was unreadable. That hurt more than if he had looked angry. Jungkook crossed the distance between them, breath unsteady, water dripping from his lashes. "You left!" Jimin's laugh was quiet and exhausted. "That tends to happen when people are invited to their own autopsy." Jungkook flinched. Jimin saw it and shut his eyes for half a second, regret flashing too late across his face. When he spoke again, his voice was softer. "I'm sorry," stared at him. "Do not apologize to me right now." Looked away, rain traced cold lines down his throat. "You should go home." Almost laughed, home, as if that word still meant anything uncomplicated after tonight. Instead, he stepped closer. "No." Jimin's eyes shut again briefly. "Jungkook." "No." The word came rougher this time. Jimin opened his eyes. Rain had blurred them dark. "You heard enough tonight to walk away." Jungkook's voice dropped. "Then you do not know me as well as you think." Something in Jimin's face shifted, not hope. Hope was too dangerous to show this soon, but something beside it. Something aching and startled and quickly hidden. Jungkook took another step forward. Cars passed behind them in streaks of light. Rain soaked them both through. Somewhere nearby, thunder rolled low across the city. "I do not care what happened in Busan," Jungkook said. Jimin's expression changed instantly, pain. Sharp and immediate. "You should." Jungkook's breath caught, not because of the words, because of the way Jimin said them, not defensive, not ashamed, afraid. Jungkook lowered his voice. "Then tell me why." Stared at him for a long moment, rain gathering at his lashes like tears he would never willingly let fall. "When I was 19, he said. "Someone loved me like possession." Jungkook said nothing. Jimin laughed once, but the sound was hollow. "I was too young to know the difference." The city seemed to quiet around them. Even the traffic felt distant. Jungkook did not move, did not interrupt. Jimin looked past him, somewhere far beyond the rain. He was older, wealthy, careful in public. Generous where people could see it, cruel where they could not. His mouth tightened. "By the time I understood what I was in, leaving had already become dangerous." Felt something cold settle beneath his ribs. Jimin's voice remained calm in the way voices only did when emotion had been burned down to ash. He controlled everything first in ways that looked like devotion. Where I went, who I answered, what I wore, what I owed him for being loved so well. Rainwater ran over Jimin's mouth. He wiped it away absently, like he had forgotten he was standing in a storm. One night I tried to leave. He decided if he could not keep me willingly, fear would do. Jungkook's hands curled. Jimin saw it and shook his head once. Not ask for details you will not survive hearing. Jungkook's chest tightened so sharply it hurt. Jimin looked at him then directly, and for the first time that night there was no evasion left in his face. Only naked, exhausted truth. I left Busan because staying would have killed something in me I would never have gotten back. The rain kept falling. Jungkook stood in it, drenched and furious and heartsick, and understood with sudden, terrible clarity that Jimin had not been withholding the truth because he did not trust him. He had been withholding it because saying it aloud made it real again. Jungkook stepped forward until only inches remained between them. Jimin did not move. His breath caught, barely visible. Jungkook's voice was low, unsteady, and stripped of everything except truth. She was wrong about one thing. Jimin's lashes lifted. Jungkook held his gaze. You should have told me, but not because it would have made me leave. Voice broke then, just enough for Jimin to hear it. Because you should not have had to carry it alone this long. For a moment, Jimin forgot how to breathe. Rain struck the pavement around them in silver fragments. Cars moved past in blurs of white and red, distant and unreal, like another life unfolding somewhere neither of them belonged. Jungkook stood too close, soaked through, shaking slightly from cold or anger or something far more dangerous, and looked at Jimin as if the truth had not made him step back but closer. That was the first unbearable thing. The second was that Jimin believed him. It arrived like terror, not soft. Not warm, sharp, and immediate and impossible to survive cleanly. Jimin's throat tightened so hard it hurt. He could still hear Mrs. Jeon's voice in his head, precise as a blade. He could still feel the silence after Busan entered the room, the pause where everything had almost changed shape. He had spent years preparing for rejection in all its forms, disgust, pity, disappointment, retreat. He had not prepared for this, for someone hearing the ugliest thing about him and reaching closer. Jimin laughed once, breathless and broken around the edges. You really should stop doing that. Jungkook frowned. Doing what? Making this harder. Rain ran down Jungkook's face, caught in his lashes, traced the line of his mouth. I'm not trying to make it harder. That's the problem. Looked away, the city glowed around them in wet light and blurred reflections. Somewhere across the street, a shop sign flickered blue, then white, then blue again. The air smelled like rainwater, exhaust, and cold metal. Familiar, urban, anonymous. The kind of night built for disappearing. Jimin had spent years becoming excellent at disappearing. He no longer knew what to do with being found. You should hate me a little, Jimin said quietly. It would make this easier to survive. Jungkook's expression shifted, not into anger but something sadder. You think that's what this is? Jimin let out a hollow breath. I think people are always gentler before they understand the full cost. Jungkook took another step closer. There was nowhere left for Jimin to retreat that would not become deliberate. I understand enough. No, Jimin said, too quickly. You understand the version that fits into one night and bad weather. Jungkook held his gaze. Then give me the version that doesn't. The words landed with quiet force. Jimin felt something inside him recoil, not because Jungkook had demanded truth, because he had asked for it like he intended to stay long enough to hold it. Jimin looked at him and saw no performance there. No savior's vanity. No reckless fantasy of being the exception strong enough to heal what someone else had broken. Only a man soaked to the skin, standing in the middle of a storm, asking to be trusted with what remained. That was somehow more frightening than cruelty. Jimin dragged a hand through his wet hair and exhaled hard. You don't know what that asks of you. Then tell me. Jimin laughed again, smaller this time. Tired, disbelieving. You always say that like the answer is simple. Jungkook did not blink. It is. No, Jungkook. Jimin's voice sharpened for the first time. It isn't. Sound startled both of them. Jimin shut his eyes. When he spoke again, his voice had gone quieter. Worse for how controlled it was. It is not simple to love someone after you learn what fear taught them to become. Jungkook's face changed, not because the words were cruel, because they were honest. Jimin swallowed. You know the easy parts of me, he said. You know the version that laughs at gallery walls and steals your cigarettes and pretends not to like sleeping in your bed. You know the version of me that can still be charming when I'm tired and beautiful when I'm lying. The rain hit harder. Jungkook said nothing. Jimin's voice thinned, but did not break. You do not know the part that checks every lock twice. The part that wakes up angry when touched too quickly. The part that memorizes how to leave before he lets himself enjoy being wanted. The part that hears kindness and waits for the debt hidden inside it. Jungkook's jaw tightened. Jimin kept going because stopping now would be worse. You do not know what it does to a person to survive being loved badly for too long. The words settled between them, heavy and rain-soaked and impossible to take back. Jungkook stared at him for so long Jimin almost regretted saying any of it. Then Jungkook said very quietly, "Do you think I have noticed?" Jimin blinked. The rain seemed to pause around the words. Jungkook stepped closer, close enough now that Jimin could feel the heat of him even through the cold. "I noticed you wake up before dawn every time you stay over, and never because you're rested." His voice remained low, steady. "I noticed you never let me stand behind you in the kitchen. I noticed you smile right before you lie about being fine. I noticed you tense every time someone grabs your wrist without warning." Jimin went still. Jungkook's eyes did not leave his. "I noticed," he said again, more quietly now, "that every time something good lasts longer than you expected, you start looking for the exit." Felt the breath leave him, not because Jungkook had seen it. Because he had seen it and stayed silent long enough to let Jimin keep his dignity. The realization hit somewhere tender enough to hurt. Jungkook exhaled shakily. "I knew something happened." His voice dipped lower. "I just thought when you were ready, you would let me be there for the part you couldn't say yet." Stared at him, stunned by the shape of that grief, not resentment, not accusation. The quiet pain of someone who had been willing to wait and was still trying to understand why waiting had turned into distance. Jimin looked down. Rain ran off his lashes in cold lines. "I didn't tell you because the last person who said he wanted all of me meant he wanted access." His voice was almost lost beneath the storm. Jungkook's breath caught. Jimin kept his eyes on the wet pavement. "I didn't know how to explain the difference between being wanted and being entered. Between being loved and being handled. Between trust and surrender." His mouth tightened. "I didn't know what would be left of me if I got it wrong again." Silence, no traffic, no thunder, no city, only rain. When Jungkook spoke, his voice had changed. Softer now, not because pity had entered it, because rage had, not at Jimin, at what had been done to him. "You think I want access?" Jimin shut his eyes. "I think wanting can become cruelty faster than people admit." Jungkook was quiet for a long time. Then with painful calm, he said, "Then let me be more careful with you than anyone has ever been." Jimin's eyes opened. The sentence landed somewhere too deep to survive untouched. He looked at Jungkook and saw no performance in him. No demand disguised as tenderness. No wounded pride asking to be rewarded for decency. Only restraint. Only choice. Only a kind of care so deliberate it frightened him more than hunger ever had. Jimin's mouth parted, but no sound came. Jungkook stepped closer still, until the rain had nowhere left to fall except between them. "I am not asking you to become easy," he said. "I am asking you to stop assuming I will punish you for being difficult to hold." Stared at him. Something in his chest gave way with a quiet, devastating crack. He had spent so long surviving versions of love that arrived sharpened, conditional, hungry. He did not know what to do with one that arrived patient. His breath left him unevenly. Jungkook. This time it was not warning. It was ruin. Jungkook heard it. His face changed in the smallest way, something softening and breaking at once. He lifted one hand slowly. Not touching, only offering. Rain ran down his wrist, over his knuckles, off the tips of his fingers. Jimin looked at that hand like it was the most dangerous thing he had ever seen, not because it could hurt him, because it might not, because he could take it, because some part of him already had. Jungkook's voice was barely more than rain now. "I'm still here," stared at him, at the open hand, at the storm, at the impossible, unbearable mercy of being given a choice and no punishment attached to refusing it. His pulse thundered. His fingers trembled. Then, with all the terror of a man stepping barefoot onto sacred ground, Jimin reached back.